And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Monday, February 19th, 2024, President's Day. And we start out with looking at the sea ice, and most notably, we're going to be concerned about, as we get into Wednesday, a strong front's going to be coming out across the Bering, shifting winds south to southwesterly here along areas of the southwest coast, so there could be enhanced water levels, especially along Kuskokwim Bay and perhaps into Bristol Bay during the day on Wednesday as a result of those stronger southwest winds. Also, the ice in place here, at least the edge of it has melted a lot here across Bristol Bay, and then up into Cook Inlet, we've had warmer temperatures surge northward with gusty southeast to south winds and air temperatures getting up into the lower 40s. So that'll also help to reduce some of the ice there across Cook Inlet. But looking farther ahead, we are likely to see a return to colder than normal temperatures here to close out the month and start at least the first few days of March. But here comes the next impulse, area of low pressure crossing the Alaska Peninsula late tonight into early Tuesday morning. That'll lift northward into the southwest interior on Tuesday. The next significant low is out here in the far southwest corner of the Bering. The system will deepen and then really propel this front across the Bering Sea as we go through Tuesday night and Wednesday. As we go into Tuesday, weak high pressure still in place over the southern portion of the Panhandle into British Columbia, so weather is going to be relatively quiet, continue to be so here in the Panhandle. A few areas to the north may have a few light showers, but other than that, the main action is with this low working its way into the southwest interior. Strong southeast to southerly push of air up through this region, and that'll cause strong winds across the Alaska Range. Chinook winds could also push temperatures into the 40s there. But this front's really going to surge eastward as we go into Wednesday, 24 hours later. Very strong front pushing in across the northern Bering into the southwest coast. So again, there's that threat of some higher water levels, especially at high tide, and perhaps even some ice shoves as a result of that low doing that. And eventually this front will work its way eastward across the Gulf and bring in active weather to the northeastern Gulf, Yakutat down through the Panhandle, especially on Thursday into Thursday night. A little bit of a lull to showery weather on Friday, and then another low is going to come up into the Gulf and impact the Panhandle over the weekend. So active weather is going to return to this region where it has been void in the previous week, thanks to that big ridge of high pressure that resided over northwest Canada. So the marine forecast coming up, still pretty quiet in for the inner channels on Tuesday. Variable winds 5 to 10 knots, waves a foot or two. The outer coast generally south-southeast winds around 10 knots, swells running about 5 feet. For Wednesday, still variable winds 5 to 10 knots, though mainly southeasterly from Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal with waves a foot or two. Variable winds only 5 knots south of Sitka, then south through easterly winds around 10 to 15 knots as you go northward, and swells generally 7 to 8 feet. Stronger winds will exist across the western and northwest Gulf as we get that stronger southeast to south wind field, 40-knot gales out of the southeast into Kennedy entrance there. We have southeast winds to 30 knots along the Kenai coast, Hinchinbrook entrance into the broader expanse of Prince William Sound, and swells along the Kenai coast as high as 12 feet. For Wednesday, we still continue some brisk winds down here across the entrance of Cook Inlet, lower Cook Inlet, south to southeasterly gales to 40 knots. That's in part because we have that front coming in from the southwest, and winds fall off to southerly 15 knots within Prince William Sound. But again, that front will be working its way across the Gulf later Wednesday and into Thursday. Looking at the winds around Kodiak Island, as high as 40 knots there on the east side in the western Gulf, with swells 15, 16 feet. They turn more westerly, 25 to 20 knots, and then fall off southwest to variable 10 knots there as we tail out around Cold Bay and False Pass. But they pick up again Wednesday because that front is going to be working its way across the Alaska Peninsula. So as a result, along and ahead of that front, southerly to southwesterly 35 to 40 knot gales from Kodiak Island all the way down along the peninsula. Swells could run as high as 12 to 14 feet on the Pacific side, 5 to as high as 12 feet north of Cold Bay. And again, with that push of wind coming into Kuskokwim Bay, there could be some higher water levels and perhaps even the potential for an ice shove Otherwise, along the Aleutians Tuesday, west winds to 20 knots in the eastern Aleutians, but they rapidly pick up west of Nikolsky. Look for westerly gales, 35 knots. And then as we get out toward the western Aleutians, we have south to southwest gales, 40 to 45 knots, as high as 50 knot storm force winds there west of Kiska. Seas building up to near 25 feet, but then here comes the big blast on Wednesday. That front just pushes all the way into the eastern Bering Sea along the southwest coast. In the wake of it, southwest gales, 40 to 45 knots, eastern central Aleutians increasing to 55 to 60 knot storm force westerly winds with some hurricane force gusts, and seas building up to 35 to near 40 feet across areas away from the western Aleutian Islands. Along the southwest coast, west wind 25 knots into Bristol Bay, 15 knots into Kuskokwim Bay, southwest winds 50 knots along the lower Yukon coastline. Easterly outflow winds to 15 knots in Norton Sound, and just variable winds 10 knots around the Pribilof. But come Wednesday, that front will be arcing up into this region. So we see 35 to 40 knot gale force winds from the south-southwest. So again, that potential exists for significant ice movement and potentially higher water levels, especially at high tide. Easterly winds to 35 knots out of Norton Sound. And then for the areas of below the Bering Strait, east winds off of Norton Sound and out of the Seward Peninsula to 20 knots, 30 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence. Winds northeasterly as high as 40 knots off of Cape Lisburne, Point Lay. This area is still having issues with blowing snow. And even up, winds start to pick up again along the Arctic coast, east to northeast, 30 knots. But look what happens on Wednesday. Easterly winds, gale force 35 knots along the Arctic coast, Kaktovik to Utqiagvik. So we would expect the potential for blowing, drifting snow to spread eastward across this region and really reduce visibility at times. Could have ground blizzard conditions at times up there along the Arctic coast on Wednesday. And as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea, look for east winds as well, 25 to 30 knots, and then easterly gales to 35 knots coming offshore flow off the Seward Peninsula out of Norton Sound and then parallel along the north side of St. Lawrence Island.